Welcome back, everybody. This is Autofocus. I'm Dan Kraft. We've got Brooke Galligan with me, of course, and we've brought in Parker Dotson, our sales guy, who's worn many hats.
Yes.
All of the
in the
hats.
time that he's been here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We brought in Parker because we're going to talk about some of our early cameras and our experiences, particularly with the GoPro cameras that we used in the prototype studio we had before this wonderful space. The reason Parker is here is because when we say we, Brooke and I didn't work here yet.
Yeah, technically.
If we want some info on the days of these boys,
Yeah.
there was, a 3-man operation at that time, too?
When I first introduced the GoPros, it was still just me.
Mhm.
And then it became 2, and then it became 3. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, technically, in 2022, when Eric had this idea first, that's when he wanted it to be cell phones, which is how we ended up with those. And so I actually was the one that I had to do all the research and pick those cell phones out.
Yep.
And that's what Parker inherited. You're welcome.
Yeah. This terrible system. Not terrible. It was a good system for what it was. But I know Eric was responsible for the cage, the WWE cage that was over the table. It was just a rectangular table. You had basically 4 still vertical bars with these little cross braces, and they had the phones hanging off of them. And
It was.
to its credit, the phones weren't terrible.
I did pick the right phones.
The issue was just the file management at that point in time, like getting it from the phone
Get
over
off
to
the
there. Plus the file sizes would get a little strange and things like that. So, I mean, it wasn't bad with the phones, but it was just one of those situations where it was like, okay, if we're going to actually do this in the right capacity, let's make it into a camera.
Yeah.
So,
and that was one of the things with the phones, because like we use Macs, and I was like, this Samsung phone is going to be great. Not realizing that Samsung, like, to get a phone, get the files off the Samsung phones
To a Mac.
to a Mac was actually just like, it was like a day on Google just to figure that out.
They hate each other.
They do hate each other.
And
so
that's
that,
probably still true today.
Oh, 100%.
yeah.
So we went to, and I say you went to the GoPros. Now, that wasn't a brand new product at the time.
No.
These were already well established as what you see GoPros commercialized as. Rugged outdoors, strapped into the helmet as you're parachuting or the side of your race car kind of thing.
Yep.
Talk a little bit about the use case and what we saw in the studio.
Yeah, so I mean, we went with these Hero 8s. So I mean, obviously they're on the 8th iteration of it, so that's great. And I'd had a GoPro in the past, and so there was this fine balance of, okay, we're in very much startup bootstrap mode. So investing in multi-$1,000 cameras didn't really make sense. Plus, in the studio that we were in, which I love, which is what we're recording on now.
It is.
But what at the old studio too, we had really no solid walls. It was just the acoustic curtains. So it's really hard to try to mount those cameras in a higher level camera in that space. So the whole idea was, let's redesign the mounting system that was on the table. And then I had a lot of familiarity with GoPro just through outdoors things. And I was like, quality looks good. They're very easy to operate. Set it, push the button, it's done pretty much. So in theory, I was like, this will work great. We can just replace the phones with the GoPros and go from there.
Sure, the quality, they're compact, they're easy enough to
100%.
use.
Yeah, easy
Didn't
to
you
put
have
that
it set up where you could like clap?
Yeah, so they actually do have a, no, it was a vocal function. So whenever people people that came in and recorded at the old space, when they would come in and we'd get ready to go, I would hit the audio and then I would say GoPro record and they would all go, and people were like, oh.
It was really fancy.
I was like, it is kind of cool.
That sounds impressive.
But yeah, so, people that knows GoPros know they kind of have that distinct, when you start recording, it's a single beep. When it stops recording, it's a 3 beep. Deep is when it stops. And so anyway, we were like, okay, GoPros can be good. Battery life will be fine. So we got a bunch of them, mounted them up. And it worked well for shorter recordings. It had no issues. Like the quality of it still looked great. As a matter of fact, I think Doing Business in Bentonville's first episode with Andy talking into the camera was shot with just a GoPro right in front of him.
Nice.
So it still looks great.
Quality was never an issue.
Quality was never an issue with it. The issue is that GoPro is designed as a outdoor adventure action sport type camera. So short bursts of recording is really where their bread and butter is. One of the main issues that I've found before we got to some probably more critical issues later on was not really an issue as much as just kind of like a hurdle headache a little bit, was that GoPros by default will start a new recording file every 17 minutes of continuous running. So it didn't interrupt the recording or stop the camera any at all. It just literally would just cache that and then start a whole new file. So
short form content, you don't notice the problem. But hour and a half long recording, suddenly you're dealing with
5-6 files from one camera. You multiply that across 5 cameras. Now I've got anywhere from 25 to 30 video files that would pop up for one podcast recording.
Yeah, so you got to sync the video and add every...
So it's a new step to the editing because, at that time I was able to do all of it.
And a file management headache.
Oh, I mean, you would literally take the card out of this, throw it in for camera 1, and you would have 5 or 6 recordings. And then you'd have to take those, put each one of those back to back in Premiere, make that in to make it easier for me, I would then export that as one video file. So then that was camera.
So you recombine them.
And then you would sync them.
Then you'd have to go back and do it for every camera.
Yep. And then do it for all 5 angles. So each individual person, then a wide angle camera, and then get all the audio synced back into it too. And so it was probably 15, 20-minute process to extract that, combine them, re-export them, and then pull it all together for the final multicam edit. So not a end of the world hurdle, just a kind of an inconvenience.
Not an ideal situation in terms of speed and efficiency.
Yeah, we want to be really efficient.
Yeah.
It's like the
just
whole
so much easier when it's one file. And it's like, okay, here's this camera, this camera, done. The bigger issue started arising later on when it was those longer hour and a half recordings. They're not really designed for that. Plus, we're indoors. So, GoPro is exactly what it is right here. These 8s have a touchscreen on the back, little screen on the front. You have a little battery door on the side. So we would run them on battery. Never really worried too much about battery life. If it was a longer hour and a half-ish one with continual running, it would get a little bit low, but it was enough to make you nervous that if some people did, even though we do 1-hour recordings, not everyone would buy it.
They might drop one.
Or somebody might stretch that to an hour 45, a big talk kind of scenario.
Like our founder.
Yeah. So the issue with that was my biggest fear would just be a camera would die mid-recording. And then you have the worry of, okay, that camera died. Did it actually back up all those files onto the card, or am I going to get corrupt?
Have I lost it all, not just...
Yeah. So then it was
recorded after it died.
100%. Yeah. So then it was hardwiring it essentially. So they can run just off the external power. So the whole thing was remove it, took the battery out, and then actually removed the battery door and then hardwired it into it so that it just literally sat open the whole time.
Now, this isn't backyard shade tree mechanic. This is something GoPro is set up to do.
It can run. Yeah, it was just their normal charging cord, but it can run from just that external power. And so would do that, but would notice, and this is by the time Nathan had come on board with us, and at the old studio, we had the little loft, above with the curtain underneath. So you couldn't talk or hardly breathe when people were recording because they were directly below your feet. And so it was one of those situations where we would hit record. I'd go upstairs, and I remember the very first time we were recording, I don't remember who it was, but I just hear a beep, beep, beep. And I was like, is that the GoPro? And so
that's not the beeps we're used to hearing.
No. And so then I heard one of the people that were in was like, hey, I think this camera just shut off, because you could no longer see the graphic on the front that said that it had the camera icon on it.
Yeah.
And so went down there, didn't really know what the deal was. So I basically we sat for like 2 or 3 minutes and just chatted a little bit, and then just repowered it back up, and it did fine the rest of the episode.
It hiccuped.
Yeah, it had a little hiccup. So I thought maybe it was just a one-off anomaly, and then it started happening more and more frequently.
Mm-hmm.
It was multiple cameras.
Oh, 100%.
Not just one camera that's...
This one would do it, and then this person's would do it, and then the wide angle might do it. And so it kind of just got to a point where it was like, okay, there's not a lot of reliability for longer form content recording like that. So once it started happening regularly, I was like, we've got an issue on our hands.
And what did it end up being?
I think it was just overheating. I mean, it never would really give me like a message per se, but it would just be off the whole time. So, I mean, there's a variety of factors that it could have been. It could have been, a bad connection, or maybe that one cable had a wear in it or whatever, but it was so many different cameras at sporadic random times that I was like, there's no way every single one of these charging cords is bad. We even had it because we had a power strip. I even had to put another power strip up there and plugged a couple of them into that to see if it was the strip. It still did it on that one. So there was never really a way to isolate what exactly the problem was.
But you think it was overheating?
I think it would. I mean, that's the one thing that would make sense to me, because whenever I would do that, and I would go to like grab it to turn it back on,
It's really hot.
it was very warm on the sides there, even without a battery running.
It's not like we could put cooling fans on them.
No,
You can't
I mean-
introduce that noise into this.
Yeah, you're in the studio. There's
situation.
no way to really pump cooler air
I mean,
directly on it.
and it's happening inside the camera,
Yeah, exactly.
unless you're like gonna.
Yeah, I
pump
mean,
air inside of it.
GoPros, you know, you got to think about a GoPro, like this little thing right here without a case, you can take, I think minus a diving case, you can still take them 30 feet underwater.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it's designed to let nothing in or out.
That would be a nice cooling.
Yeah. And you
30
would
feet under though.
And you would really think, like, when you remove this battery door and then you remove the battery, like if you look into that camera, it's well over half the
Yeah,
body is just a
there's
hole.
not much else going on in
No,
there.
you
Yeah.
think it's just a hole. And so it's one of those things where it's like, I don't really know how it's continuing to overheat, because we removed all the possibilities of it essentially. So I'm not sure.
It's also sitting there static, where a GoPro is really kind of designed to be.
Oh,
like,
yeah,
sit-
yeah.
Strapped to the helmet while you're skydiving.
Yeah.
Bolts it to the side of a race car. It's going to
Yeah.
get a lot of air.
Being underwater, different
Yeah.
things like
It'd be
that.
fun to
So,
try hardwire it for that.
Yeah, I mean, but yeah.
True. Yeah. So there was just no definitive factor of, okay, this is why we're having this issue.
Right. But GoPro, if you have any suggestions, like let us know.
No, I still love GoPros. Like I bought a new one, I think last year, one of the newest models, because I hadn't had one since a 4. And I thought these 8s were incredible. And then I got a 12 or 13 or whatever it was. And I was like, ooh, I mean, it's incredible, the picture quality on them. But for the use case of long form content recording, it just wasn't the proper answer for it, really.
Right. Not a bad product, just
No, not a bad product at
quite what we needed.
It's just a misuse of what it's designed for.
And that's why we ended up moving on to those Logitech Mevos.
Yeah. Which
Right
is,
there.
Yeah. This was the next replacement for that.
The start.
That's
Get
what
'em
we
in
moved
there.
to the new studio here with, and what we recorded
Yep.
quite a
Yep.
few. Did we start autofocus in the 4K, or did we get a couple with that?
Nope.
Okay.
Yeah.
So generationally,
Y'all are fancy.
the phones, which I didn't even know about until we had the conversation right before this started. I thought the GoPros were the OG.
No,
Nope.
the phones weren't. We did. I think I did one recording with the phone, and I was like, "No, I'm not gonna do this."
And yeah. And I
It's
was like,
mainly the
please.
file transfer was the
The
issue.
file transfer, it was definitely the issue. And then it was just, I did that. I did all that research. The first time I had COVID is when, I had to do all this research and put the studio stuff together. So,
And to
But it
its
works.
credit, I use an iPhone just because I use Mac, and it's easily compatible back and forth. But like,
the iPhones were really expensive and the Samsung was like affordable.
but I've always thought Galaxy cameras have better quality than the iPhone ones.
Yep.
did.
And that's
So-
was supposed to, and that there was the new one and then there was that one. And so I went
Yeah.
with the lower grade just
No,
for the
there's-
startup.
So truly OG.
truly OG.
We got some problems.
Yeah.
The first solution,
Yep.
good product, use case not quite there.
Yep.
The workhorse we've been using for most of the last, 15 months, 18
Yeah.
months?
Yep.
1080p Logitech camera.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll let Brooke grab that one.
Oh, yeah.
This one is the 4K, which is what you're
4K.
seeing us in today. So,
Yeah.
Maybe you like the 1080 better because you can't quite see certain things, but
Yes. The
That's,
4K Blackmagic Micro.
Yeah.
So that's, yeah.
It's been really cool. I mean, I would have loved to have gone something like that off the rip, but whenever you're a small
Right.
company, you just, hey, I want to invest X amount of money in cameras. It's like,
do you remember what these cost brand new at the time?
probably $350.
Okay, and I think brand new, that's
Those
about
are-
what those were running.
Like 500.
And what are
they're
those?
$399.
What are
for
their
the stores.
4Ks running, Brooke?
995
For the body only.
for the
then you
body.
gotta buy a
And then you got to buy
$300
the lens, which is like 200 to 300.
Yeah.
Okay. So we've established kind of what worked for us, what didn't.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of a pricing difference if that's a big factor for you.
Yeah. But I will say, like, one other thing that I love about switching to this, which as a photo video person before podcast videos, I've always had, obviously, interchangeable camera lenses. And so the limitation of having a non-detachable lens is pretty significant unless you're in a smaller setting. And so, certain things, even the way this original studio was built, was designed with that in mind of not being able to actually zoom with these cameras. You had the optical zoom, digital optical zoom, whatever it's called. But it just
They're never the same.
The quality
Never good.
drops
Exponentially.
unbelievably how much it falls off as soon as you zoom in with those. So that's fantastic because then you can you have a lot more flexibility to clean up the space and remount cameras different ways and all that stuff. So
Yeah, because the camera's out of the wide angle. And
yeah,
it gets on
especially
the wall.
mainly in our case scenario because we use the TV for branding purposes and things like that. So when you have to have this camera within roughly probably 4 foot of somebody's face,
Not more, not less.
it makes it really difficult to get this in my setting without it being hanging somewhere within blocking the TV range.
Yeah,
So-
and they're
and
really
keep a proper angle.
yeah, and they're super wide angle. So
Very wide
when it's
angle.
pointed down, then it like makes basically
Yeah.
we have like some that are really wide
Yeah.
foreheads.
Yep.
Yeah,
Like-
the Mevo. I mean, the Mevos are there's nothing wrong with them, but they're
no, they
they're
were great.
essentially designed as like a step up above your webcam into multiple cameras and potential for live streaming things like that. It just something like that
So,
is a little bit more.
hey, let's try this.
Yeah.
So, hey, let's try this. This is going to work better.
Yeah,
Workhorse,
yeah,
new and hot.
yeah. Next
Yeah,
level.
next level. Like, yeah, now we're like grown up.
Yeah.
We're like big boys now.
Yeah.
Like we're like going to, it's like you're learning to walk, you're learning to crawl,
Crawl,
walk, run, and then now you're in track.
Yeah, true. I do have I have a soft spot for the original Mevos, just simply because the ease of use with being able to open the app and see all the camera angles at one time. You don't need a switcher. You don't need all these other components. I did really like that about it. It's just the limitation within the mounting that really kind of held it back.
Yeah.
So you also got to keep in mind too the scale of the technology that's required to support each of these things. So these two are completely self-sustained. They don't need any kind of additional app or any kind of interface or function whatsoever. This can run pretty simply off of just the app that comes with the
And a pretty basic
Logitechs. Yeah.
computer. Even you don't even necessarily need an equalizer or a switcher for it.
No, yeah. I mean, it was just you have an iPad or a cell phone, you can hit record on multiple cameras at once.
Yeah, and it records to its own SD.
Yeah, and it records internally. Yeah.
But then you have to like take the SD card out and not try to.
This level requires
That's the one where, yes, Brooke went out and bought a bunch of cameras and then just kept spending money on the other stuff we needed to make the cameras work.
Yeah.
one
No,
whole
there's
desk
another-
in marketing's office that is just full of all the
of
new
all the
products just to be able to make the studio
The switch
fully
from here
equipped with these.
to there. Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
But it's going to be really awesome.
Oh, it is 100% worth it. Like even the stuff that we've seen from those, recordings we've been doing.
Yeah, the
here.
live stream. We did a live stream with these the other day. It was so nice.
But the quality difference for whenever you're taking that content and repurposing it for social media uses and things like
100%.
that, as you start to crop it down, that quality of having a 4K really starts to shine through.
Yep.
So
All right. So that is our OG report on our days with the GoPro
yep.
and the days since.
Yeah.
Parker, thanks for taking some time to sit down with us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Brooke, always good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you.
I think we'll be back to record another
I
one here
will
in
see you in like 3 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And we will see you next week. Thanks for listening, everybody. This is
Bye.
Our Focus.